Okay, guys. Hello. Welcome back to the Great Beyond.
Ooh.
Well, how did you like the first episode of season 4, everybody?
Tell us your thoughts, the good, the bad, the ugly, mostly the good. But we are so excited to be back. I know we already said that in the last episode, but it really just feels so good.
It feels so good and it begs to be said again. Welcome. We're back. This episode is going to be centered around Twerky Day. Do you remember when everyone was saying that?
I feel like I missed that chapter of life, but I'll take your word.
No, it was a thing because I was looking back on my Instagram and I said, Happy Twerky Day. Like, that's so embarrassing.
I love that. The digital footprint is forever, thankfully.
Thankfully, very, very topical. And on the theme of kind of Thanksgiving and just giving thanks, I'm so excited to get into this episode. But first, Andy, your celebrity Thanksgiving table, you have 5 seats. Who's sitting in it?
5 seats. God, I'm watching Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So either Lisa Rinna or Lisa Vanderpump, maybe both for the tea. 5 is tough, Lexi.
I know. So let's do both Lisa's. You know what? And on the Bravo train, I'm going to say I want Jax Taylor there.
Stop. Okay, no, we should make a joint one. Joint Bravo Thanksgiving table. Andy Cohen, duh.
Duh.
He needs to be like the host. And you know what? Why not throw
Mary Cosby.
Mary freaking Cosby? Perfect. I love it.
There we go. And one more question I have before we get into this fun episode. Your favorite meal at Thanksgiving?
I'm really a sides girly as a vegetarian. So I'm going for the mac and cheese. That's my favorite savory. My favorite sweet, because you have to have two, girl. You can't pit two queens against each other. Favorite sweet, I'm a pecan pie lover. What about you, Lexi?
I would say one of my favorite is maybe stuffing. I love a good stuffing. And then at my Nana's Thanksgiving, we always have this meal called ajidi pep. And it's not really called that, but that's what I like. So the ajidi pep and the stuffing, girl. And honestly, I like the gelatin cranberries. I'll say it. I'll go out on a limb.
I am not coming to your Thanksgiving celebrity dream table if that's what you're serving.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to come because you know what, Andy? You weren't invited. In all seriousness, given that it's Thanksgiving and we should all be talking about, I guess, what we're really grateful for. Andy, what are you grateful for this season?
Thank you for asking, Lexi. This season, I am so grateful to be talking to Barbara Whitfield today. She's essentially NDE royalty. Barbara is a researcher at the University of Connecticut Medical School with psychiatry professor Bruce Grayson, who is the research director for the International Association for Near Death Studies, or IANDS.
Woo!
I know, super cool. Together, they research the after effects of people who have had an NDE. She's also taught at Rutgers University Institute for Alcohol and Drug Studies school for 12 years. She served on the board and executive board of IANDS. She's a past president and board member of the Kundalini Research Network. She's a really cool lady, has great insights to share. So we're super excited to talk to her today.
Well, I'm so excited to listen to it. So without further ado, here is our interview with Barbara. So today we are here with Barbara Whitfield, and I'm so excited for her to get to share her story with us. And I'm excited to get right into your story, Barbara. So take it away.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and tell you my story. You know, the near-death experience happened 50 years ago. This coming June will be my 50th anniversary. But I have to tell you that once I start talking about it, it's like I'm back there again. It may be 50 years ago, and I've interviewed hundreds of near-death experiencers, and we all say the same thing. It's like it happened yesterday. It's like reality just kind of opens up and we step through into eternity. And eternity is always right there. So that's why when we talk about our experiences, they're just right there again. My life started off in a family that didn't know what children need. My mother was mentally ill and addicted to drugs. And my dad was emotionally totally vacant. And I had one brother, and my childhood was just very sad. I married young, and my husband took over where my mother left off. And I became an atheist. I mean, I didn't believe in anything because I don't know if I was bitter, but I was always forlorn. I was always, is this all there is? And how could I believe in a God if I was being treated the way I was treated? So anyway, at the age of 32, I injured my back and I went through 4 hospitalizations and a lot of drugs and realized that I was becoming like my mother, which is really scary. Finally, they suggested a spinal fusion operation. And I went into the hospital, and the next day after I got there, they operated, and they said it was going to be a 2 hour operation, but it became a 5.5 hour operation because there was a lot of damage that they couldn't see on x-ray. This was 1975. We didn't know half of what we know now when it comes to fractured lumbar spine. Anyway, I woke up in a striker frame circle bed, which is just an awesome bed. It's like two big chrome hoops, and they've got a stretcher suspended in the middle. And I couldn't move, but 3 times a day they would put another stretcher over me and they would rotate me up and onto my belly. And I would stay like that for about 20 minutes, and that was to drain my lungs and air out my back. Like the second day after the surgery, I started to die. I woke up and I saw this huge belly, and I thought, oh, I'm having another baby. But I wasn't. I was swollen up from something called an ileus. My whole trunk of my body swelled up, and I was bleeding internally. And people started rushing in with blood and bags of other stuff that they were hanging. And at that point, I just remember screaming, leave me alone, let me die. I just really wanted to get out of here. I wasn't being a mother to my children anymore. I wasn't being a wife to my husband. And here I was suspended in this bed. And I knew eventually when I got out of that bed, I was going to be in a body cast. I thought for 6 weeks, but I was for 6 months. As I was screaming, stop, stop, I passed out. And the next thing I knew, it was the middle of the night and I was up in the hall. When I say up, I was up near the ceiling. And I knew that because when I turned around to move back in, I was looking at a PA speaker that was above my doorway and I was nose level with it. Came back into the room, looked at her for a few minutes. She wasn't me. I was up near the ceiling and for the first time out of pain. And I wasn't even scared. And the next thing I knew, I was moving through darkness. And I mean, I was moving. I could feel and kept looking at whatever I was going through. And there was a churning, like energy was churning in the darkness and light was coming out and light was moving ahead of me to form the light. And I mean, I almost knew immediately. It was like something was talking to me. Light comes out of darkness. We have to go into the darkness sometimes to find the light. And that's what was happening. And the next thing I knew, I could feel my grandmother's arms pulling me into her lush warmth. And she had been dead for, I think, 14 years. But we re experienced our life together. We re experienced all that love we had for each other. And I wasn't just me experiencing it, I was her too. I could feel everything I was doing for her by her loving me. And then she started moving away from me, but she let me know with no words, but in my heart, that she would always be there waiting for me. Well, this atheist did not know what to make of all of this. But the next day, I tried telling a couple of the nurses, and I told one doctor, and they told me I was hallucinating. I knew I wasn't hallucinating. And when I protested, they would give me a shot to calm me down. So I learned very quickly not to talk about it. But my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, who moved to California, I rarely saw them after this. I told them, and they're still telling me from 50 years ago, you told us all about it. Anyway, it happened again a week later. And when it happened a week later, they forgot about me and I had been rotated down to my face. It's very, very uncomfortable. I only weighed 89 pounds at that point. I mean, I weigh 110 now. I was really, really skinny. And the cot or whatever I was on was very uncomfortable. So I started calling and then I started screaming because the button had fallen away. And all of my senses were heightened. So the door was closed so the noise wouldn't bother me. They couldn't hear me. And I stayed like that and I got hysterical and I passed out. And one of the triggers that we learned about in the science end of this is something called the trauma transcendence interface. I was not on the critical list anymore. I was not near death. What happened was it became so traumatic that I went out of my body. And as I went out of my body this time, I saw myself at about a year old, face down in my bed crying. And then I looked back and I saw me, 32 years old, laying face down in the circle bed crying just as hard. And about the third time I was trying to figure this out, I thought, I'm going to let her go. I don't want to be that Barbara anymore. I'm going to go to the baby. And as I let go, this amazing energy came in and just wrapped itself around me and moved into me and was me too, to the point where I could feel through its heart and I could see through its eyes. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. And it was part of me and I was part of it. And together we moved to the baby. And the baby was picture like a bubble. The baby was in a bubble crying. And then all of a sudden, as we're moving close, this became a cloud with thousands of bubbles. And in every bubble was another event in my life. And together, we were like bobbing from bubble to bubble. And at the same time, it had a linear sequence, and it was the 32 years of my life. And as I watched it again, I could feel everything everybody else was feeling. It was like we were all one. It's an illusion that we're separate. And I kept hearing myself saying, no wonder, no wonder. And what I meant the no wonders to be is, no wonder I am the way I am now. Look what was done to me as a child. And then the rest of my 32 years was not pleasant. And this energy would hold me tighter and tighter. And, years later, I went on to become Bruce Grayson's research assistant. When he wrote about, I think it was in his book after, that my life review, which I've just explained to you, is the prototype for life reviews. Only 20% of the people who have near-death experiences have a life review. But if they could have a life review, this is exactly what Bruce said. This gave me so much information on how to start healing.
Wow, that was incredible. The amount of detail. I felt like I could envision, obviously not quite exactly what you experienced, but like when you were saying it, you just have a way of describing it too that like it felt like a movie playing right in front of me. That was amazing.
I thought that was very fascinating, and I thought it was super cool that you got to experience the quote unquote perfect life review, even according to Dr. Grayson. Could you maybe elaborate on how your near death experience and your life review and everything that's happened to you up until this point shape your perspective on your life after the incident?
My life internally changed completely. I did not come out the same person. I believe that I came out the way I would have been if I would have had a healthy childhood. I had this new information about me and that I really wasn't ashamed. I heard that a lot in my childhood, lots and lots of shame, that I really was being held back and that I needed to get out and become who I am. So I went back to school and I became a respiratory therapist and I started working in hospitals. And pretty soon it got to the point where the staff would know if somebody was dying to ask me to go in and sit with them. I was sitting with dying patients. And even when I was a student, and one of my teachers encouraged me to write about what happened in the circle bed. And I did. And I got published in a journal. And then I got invited to speak at a national educational conference. All these things were happening where I was just getting confidence. My husband at the time, we divorced 9 years later. He said to me, I know you're enjoying your work, but you can't bring it home. I don't want to hear it. So I had to bottle it up. And then I read an article in Omni magazine about a professor at the University of Connecticut called Ken Ring. This was before the internet. So I, wrote him a long letter. He always teases me when he sees me because the letters added up to 55 pages over the correspondence back and forth. Coincidentally, and my whole life has been one coincidence after another since, he was speaking at a conference 10 minutes from my house the next month. So he invited me to come and I did. But this was in the early 80s. We didn't know what we know now. And at the end of the talk, he said, is there anybody in the audience who's had a near-death experience? Would you like to say it? And nobody raised their hand. And he said, is Barbara Harris here? So, I raised my hand and he said, would you like to tell your near-death experience? And I told my near-death experience. When I was finished, it was dead silence. And I thought, oh. Then all of a sudden, people started to clap. For the next year, letters went back and forth between him at the University of Connecticut and me in South Florida. He asked me to read books on something called Kundalini, which I had never heard of before. And I realized that I was getting all the symptoms he was talking about. When I would go into somebody who was dying, my hands would heat up. While I was touching them, I could see their color was coming back, and they would tell me that their pain medication was working. So something was coming through. And I still couldn't use the word God until I saw the movie Star Wars and I heard about the Force. And I said, okay, this is a force coming through me. And I know it's spiritual and I know it helps people. So I started doing a lot of hands on healing. And I knew I'd get into trouble if I stayed at the hospitals. So I switched to home care for the dying. And I was really enjoying it. And then I was asked to speak at nursing conferences. And then hospice was starting and they were asking me to teach. Anyway, Ken invited me to come up and be interviewed for Heading Toward Omega. So I went up there and we just talked this all out. 4 days of all of this. I had no idea where this was going. I had no idea what the theme of Heading Toward Omega was, but I can tell you that the week the book came out, my husband and I separated. He didn't want any of this to go on.
Wow, that is incredible stuff. To me, what I'm, kind of gathering from the whole show we've been doing, and especially your interview, is there are commonalities across kind of the board when it comes to NDEs, but in the same instance, everyone's near-death experience is so unique to them. And it sounds like you really had like a twice in a lifetime maybe experience, but you use that to in turn help others in those last moments of their lives, which is absolutely incredible. I kind of want to tie into the theme of our episode, which is gratitude. We're in the middle of November. Perfect time to kind of reflect and talk about gratitude. So, Barbara, I know that many people say that facing death makes them more appreciative of life. Can you tell us a little about how your NDE influenced your own sense of gratitude as well as kind of your relationship with your loved ones?
My life from then on, I was 32 at that time and I'm 81 now. And my life has become one lesson after another, and they're all great lessons. It's like God is teaching me, or Holy Spirit is teaching me, or Ruach HaKodesh, or Kundalini, or whatever you want to call this amazing energy. It's in my life. And another friend of mine and me, who both near-death experiencers, we wrote a book about it. It's like the Cliff Notes to how to handle a lesson and pull out of it what we're supposed to be learning. And every time that happens, there's gratitude. We're healing, we're expanding, we're becoming who we are. And to fast really forward, I finished a book called Grieving and Gratitude. My husband, who I married many years later, was Charles Whitfield. He wrote Healing the Child Within, and between the two of us, we've written 30 books. Many of them we wrote together, some of them we wrote separately. And through all these years, through the years of working with Dr. Grayson, through the years of working with Charlie Whitfield, I learned so much. I healed mostly. We're still human and humans still have flaws. But when he died, when he left, it was like my whole world collapsed. I had nothing of what I had with him because I couldn't practice anymore. I was practicing under his license. We loved each other dearly. We wrote books about it. Through the grieving, what I realized was saving me. It was something that was coming up from my gut. I still want to go on living. I still want to write. I still want to put my hands on people who need it. This is gratitude. This is God. That's what life is all about, is realizing how grateful we are for life. Life is amazing. I moved to Florida right away because two of my kids live here, so I could be near my kids. One of them is in her 60s, one of them's in his 50s, but that doesn't matter. They're still my kids. And we hadn't been together in a long time. We had lived in separate cities. So I have found new things to keep me going.
Absolutely. And on that theme of gratitude, and I think even just hearing about your story, it can like change people's minds. But for people who haven't experienced an NDE or any type of spiritual awakening like that, what can they do to kind of cultivate a similar mindset of gratitude and spiritual growth? Are there like certain things they can do?
Anybody who's done research on this claims that they've been changed as much as a near-death experiencer. So read the books, because just imagine reading one of my books, what I just said. You're going to feel it. Bruce says it's contagious. Dr. Raymond Moody said it's contagious. Ken, for sure. When he wrote Lessons from the Light, he said that throughout the book. You're going to feel it. It's so deep. It's God. It's Holy Spirit just wrapping itself around us and saying there's so much more to life than just physical reality. But as a near-death experiencer and writing books and interviewing people, I'm convinced death is not the grim reaper. Death is a trip into the light. And I think that whole grim reaper thing was a way to control us, to keep us in fear. I know what's going on right now because we're right on the edge of a huge global transformation. What's happening is we're going from a fear-based consciousness to a love, compassion based consciousness. I know now if I start to feel fear, I talk myself into it being awe. I'm seeing something so awesome instead of being afraid of it.
I agree. And I think it was something that you might have said early on, and I'm definitely paraphrasing, but the other realities or realms like life and death, they're all hanging out right there. It's present all around us. So who knows how then the veil is between those things? And I feel like it gives me comfort in that all that we are and all that we can want to be as humans and what we're searching for is all right there, you know?
It is, but sometimes we have to do some work on ourselves to move beyond the pain we've been carrying for years. But Charlie had written it out this way. He talked about 3 stages of healing. The very bottom is 0, and there's no healing, obviously. It can be anything physical, especially autoimmune diseases, it can be a psychiatric disorder, but whatever it is sitting there, we're getting help from the medical profession, focusing just on that. But underneath that is the woundedness that we still have from our childhood. So even if we do heal from whatever that is, that woundedness is still there if we don't address it, and something else is going to break down. So stage 1 is to heal that stage 0 disorder. Stage 2 takes a couple years to get that under control. Stage 2 is what Charlie calls adult child healing. As adults, we're looking back at the trauma from our childhood. And what we used to do in group, and this was so powerful, is when somebody would share something that happened to them this week that was very upsetting, we would link it back to something in their childhood. So they could go back with us around them and grieve. Remember, if you're going to cry, I'm going to give you a reason to cry. I mean, I heard that all the time. Well, guess what? I can cry now at 81 years old for something that hurt me in my childhood and finally let go of what I was holding on to. And when I let go of what I was holding on to, the energy in all those little tubes that was blocked releases. So I can see it on an energy level. We need to do that kind of work, adult child therapy, to release what we're still holding in our subtle body. And then stage 3, it got to the point where our patients had been with us so long that they were graduating from the stage 2 group therapy. We did stage 3. And what did we do? We made meaning. Like, I'm making meaning out of what happened to me as a child. I would have never understood Charlie's work if I hadn't gone through it. So I'm making meaning. That's stage 3.
I feel like I'm going to leave this interview so inspired to like do that inner work that is tough, but so necessary. So I just have 2 last questions for you, Barbara. The first one is just because we've covered so many amazing things in this episode, what is that one thing that you really want our listeners to take away?
There is a God in the universe. He is not an old man with a long white beard. This is an energy that loves us amazingly and doesn't judge us. We judge ourselves. When I saw what I had done in my 32 years, there were things I was not proud of. I had to feel what the other people were feeling, but this energy wasn't judging. And it's so amazingly brilliant that our little brain can't begin to comprehend what the Creator is. But the Creator is there.
That was really beautiful. Lastly, anything you want to promote? I know you talked about your latest book, which ties in perfectly in the themes of this episode. So the floor is yours. Anything you'd like to promote?
Just go to our website, barbara-whitfield.com, and you'll see our books. One page is all of our op-eds. We were writing op-eds for several years and putting them on platforms on the net. So those are really deep spiritual opinions between the two of us. And there's another page about the best doctors in America. Charlie, for the last 25 years, had been every year voted by a panel of his peers to be one of the best doctors in America. And when you read the write-up on it, you can find out when you need a specialist who's on this list of best doctors.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are so appreciative that you took the time to speak to us. And I know all our Bright Light Beyonders are super excited to hear this. So thank you again from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wow. I don't know about you guys, but I found that so powerful. I really loved Barbara's perspective on gratitude and how with the darkness, you need that light. And even, some of the darkest moments of our lives, we can either, find gratitude in the moment or look back and be grateful for what those times taught us or, how they made us the person we are today, including her near-death experience, which was incredible to listen to. So Lexi, what are some of your thoughts on Barbara's interview?
Well, first of all, Barbara that literally is famous in my book. I mean, guys, if you've been listening from the beginning, she's hitting all of our main players. Dr. Grayson, she's talking about Ray Moody, Ken Ring, all of the people that we've heard about. And also to be the first woman on the board of IANS is super awesome. I think one of the main things that I took away from what she was saying is just kind of like how close life is to death and how we need to be grateful for the life that we have and not really take for granted what we do have. Because as she was saying, at 32, she kind of went through a metamorphosis and was able to work on her past traumas. And I feel like that's a great lesson for even people nowadays. Like, you cannot move on if you have things that are hindering you. You don't have to die and come back to know that or to hear that. I'm telling you. She's telling you, society as a whole should be telling you, we have to feel our past, learn from it, and then we can continue to grow. I also found kind of it interesting, and I guess like a synchronicity in a way, that she spoke about seeing her grandma. And a lot of us, when we're going into this Thanksgiving, will be around family. And it was her grandma ultimately who kind of told her that, like, whenever she's ready, she's going to be there. And she doesn't judge her and she loves her. I think it's important as we sit around at our Thanksgiving table and as we go into this holiday season where family is around, that we look past people's flaws and really look at the person and the light that they are. And let's collectively heal and work on big ups, if you know what I mean.
I completely agree. This is a time that I know can be divisive for some families, but I want to be intentional about cherishing those small moments of connection during this time with our families, because Barbara's story was a powerful reminder that life is fleeting, kind of like what we talked about in the very first episode of this season. Life is fleeting, and we always assume that we have tomorrow, next month, next week, next year. And while I hope that to be true for each and every one of us, of course, sometimes the reality is we don't know, but that's also what makes life so beautiful. So this Thanksgiving, eat some mac and cheese, and if you want to ruin your appetite, eat some canned cranberries for Lexi. To all those who celebrate, happy Thanksgiving. We can't wait for episode 3. It's going to be a really good one. Thank you to Barbara. This interview was incredible and such a great way to kick off our interviews this season. So as always, not just during Thanksgiving, but every day of your life, live life beyond.